Imagine waking up on the 4th of July, at the height of summer, and seeing your breath freeze in the air. It is the year 1816. In New England and Europe, rivers freeze over, and brown snow falls on green fields. Birds drop dead, frozen in mid-flight. Number 1. The Cry of the Mountain. Terrified farmers look up at the gray sky, believing the sun has been extinguished forever. No one understood what was happening. They didn't know that the culprit wasn't divine retribution, but a mountain located 12,000 kilometers away that had decided to erase summer from history. A year earlier, in April 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia ceased to be a mountain and became a bomb. The explosion was the largest recorded in human history, with a power equivalent to 30,000 atomic bombs. The mountain pulverized itself, launching 40 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the stratosphere. The sound was so violent it was heard 2,500 kilometers away. On the island of Sumbawa, day turned into instant night. 10,000 people were wiped out in a second by flows of boiling gas racing down at hurricane speeds. But the explosion was just a beginning. The true killer was invisible. The volcano injected millions of tons of sulfur into the atmosphere, creating an aerosol veil that encircled the entire planet. The shield acted like a giant mirror, reflecting sunlight back into space. The Earth entered a perpetual twilight. Sunsets became a violent and psychedelic blood red, a toxic beauty that painters of the time captured without knowing they were painting their own doom. The planet began to cool drastically. With the climate broken, harvests around the world failed simultaneously. It was the worst subsistence crisis of the modern world. The price of bread skyrocketed. In the markets of Europe and Asia, people sold their possessions for a handful of rotten rice. Riots, looting, and entire families dying on muddy roads were documented. People ate grass, leather, and rats to survive. Typhus took advantage of the weakness to kill those that hunger had not yet claimed. It is estimated that hundreds of thousands of people died because of a single eruption on the other side of the world. Tambora showed us how fragile our civilization is in the face of a temperature change of just 3 degrees. The climate eventually recovered, and the sun shone again. But humanity had no time to rest. While we were recovering from the cold and hunger, a different threat, biological and silent, was awakening along the trade routes. Something that didn't need to block the sun to kill half the known population. Number 2. The Invisible Scythe.
Imagine walking through a city where every second door is marked with a red cross. It is the year 1350. The streets of Paris, Florence, and London are eerily silent. There are no merchants yelling, no children playing. The only sound breaking the silence is the wooden rattle of the carts collecting bodies. In less than 5 years, the human population has collapsed. 200 million souls have vanished. It wasn't a war, nor an earthquake. It was something small, silent, and microscopic. This is the story of how humanity almost went extinct because of a flea. The nightmare began in the east, but it knocked on Europe's door at the port of Kaffa in Crimea in the year 1347. The city was under siege by the Golden Horde army, but the attackers were dying from a mysterious sickness. In a final act of biological warfare, the Mongol general ordered the infected corpses of his own soldiers to be loaded onto catapults. They launched the dead over the city walls. The plague rained down from the sky. The terrified Genoese traders inside the city fled to their ships, setting sail for Italy. They thought they were escaping death, but they were actually bringing it with them. The ships arrived in Sicily, known today as the ghost ships. When the port authorities boarded them, they found most of the sailors dead or dying, covered in black, oozing boils. They ordered the ships to leave immediately, but it was already too late. The true killer had already disembarked. It wasn't the sailors, but the rats and the fleas living on them. These tiny insects carried the bacterium Yersinia pestis. As the rats scurried into the unsuspecting towns, the timer started. The greatest killer in history had officially entered Europe. The symptoms were the stuff of nightmares. It started with a fever, followed by the appearance of bubes, swellings the size of apples in the groin or armpits. These would turn black and burst. Internal bleeding caused dark patches under the skin, giving the disease its name, the Black Death. There was no cure. Doctors wore terrifying beak masks filled with herbs, believing the smell would protect them, but they died just like their patients. Fathers abandoned sons, priests refused the last rites. Social order crumbled completely. It was a literal hell on earth where the living were not enough to bury the dead. When the dust finally settled, the feudal system was broken, labor was scarce, and the modern world began to emerge from the ashes of the old. The plague reshaped our genetics and our society forever. But while humanity learned to fear the air and the animals, we forgot that the earth itself is restless. We survived the cold of Tambora and the sickness of the plague, but we are never safe. Sometimes, the ground beneath our feet simply gives way. In the heart of China, the deadliest shaking in human history was about to wake up.
Number 3. The crumbling earth. It is the evening of January 23, 1556. We are in the Shanxi province, China. The landscape here is unique. Millions of people live not in houses made of wood or stone, but inside the earth itself. They live in yaodongs, artificial caves carved directly into the soft yellow loess cliffs. It is a brilliant architectural adaptation to the cold winters and hot summers. Families are sleeping peacefully inside these earthen wombs, feeling safe and protected by the mountain. They do not know that the very soil protecting them is about to become their tomb. In the middle of the night, the silence breaks. It isn't a rumble, it is a roar. An earthquake of magnitude 8 hits the region. While modern earthquakes are deadly, this one strikes the worst possible location at the worst possible time. The soft, sandy soil of the cliffs undergoes a process called liquefaction. Instantly, the solid ground turns into a fluid. The mountains don't just crack, they disintegrate. Entire cliffsides slide down like water, burying the yaodongs instantly. The destruction covers an area of 840 kilometers. In some counties, 60% of the entire population is wiped out in minutes. The official records from the Ming Dynasty describe the scene with chilling horror. Mountains and rivers changed places and roads were destroyed. In some places, the ground suddenly rose up and formed new hills, or it sunk abruptly and became new valleys. There was nowhere to run because the ground you ran on was sinking. When the dust finally settled, the cost of the disaster became clear. 830,000 people were dead. It remains, to this day, the deadliest earthquake in recorded human history. The loss of life was so extreme that it took decades for the population to recover. It wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a demographic collapse. The scariest part? It wasn't the strongest earthquake ever recorded. It was simply the one that hit the most vulnerable architecture. The Shanxi earthquake proved that the earth can swallow us whole. But while the ground is dangerous, there is a force even more powerful and relentless. It gives life, but when it rages, it takes more than any war or earthquake combined. We travel forward in time to the 20th century, when the sky turned black and the rivers refused to stop rising. The deadliest natural disaster of the modern era was about to drown the heart of civilization. Number 4. The endless ocean. In the winter of 1930, nature began to brew a perfect poison.
Heavy snowstorms froze the highlands of China. When spring arrived, the thaw was violent, filling the rivers to the brim. But then the rains came. Usually, the region sees 2 cyclones a year. In 1931, there were 7 in just 1 month. The Yangtze and the Yellow River, the arteries of the nation, began to pulse with a deadly volume. The water pressed against the earthen dikes, rising inch by inch, screaming to be let out. On August 18th, the inevitable happened. The dikes at Gaoyu, which held back the fury of the water, disintegrated. It wasn't a leak, it was an explosion of water. A wall of mud and debris slammed into the sleeping villages. In the city of Wuhan, the water level didn't just rise to the ankles, it rose to the 2nd floor of buildings. The streets became rushing rapids. People didn't drown because they couldn't swim, they drowned because the sheer force of the current crushed them against their own homes. The scale of the flooding is almost impossible for the human mind to comprehend. An area equivalent to the size of England was completely submerged. From the air, the dry land had simply ceased to exist. Pilots flying over the region reported seeing no land for miles, only a brown, churning ocean dotted with floating corpses and wreckage. 15 million people lost their homes instantly. They were cast adrift on makeshift rafts floating over what used to be their farms. The water killed the first wave, but the aftermath killed the rest. With the crops destroyed and the water stagnant, the survivors faced a fate worse than drowning. Cholera and typhus spread like wildfire through the refugee camps. Starvation was so severe that desperate families were forced to trade children for food, and cases of cannibalism were whispered in the camps. By the time the waters receded, the death toll was estimated between 1 million and 4 million people. It was the deadliest natural disaster of the modern era. Humanity rebuilt the dikes. We learned to manage the water, to predict the storms. We thought we had conquered nature through engineering.
But more than 70 years later, something happened that no dam or construction humanity had created could stop. And on a morning in December 2004, something occurred that no one could have foreseen.
Number 5. The Roar of Silence.
It is the morning of December 26, 2004. The sun shines over the turquoise waters of Thailand, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka. Thousands of European tourists are enjoying their Christmas holidays in paradise. Families are having breakfast by the sea. Children play in the sand. Everything is perfect. But 30 kilometers deep, beneath the ocean floor, 2 tectonic plates that have been pushing against each other for centuries are about to snap. At 7:58 a.m., the Earth releases the energy of 23,000 Hiroshima bombs in a matter of seconds. The 3rd largest earthquake in history has just occurred, but on the surface, no one feels it yet. Minutes after the tremor, something happens that defies logic. The ocean does not attack, it retreats. The sea begins to be sucked toward the horizon at a terrifying speed. Boats are left stranded on dry sand. Coral reefs hidden from millennia are exposed to the sun, and fish flop, dying in the mud. Human curiosity is fatal. Hundreds of people walk out onto the exposed seabed to see the phenomenon, take photos, and collect shells. They do not know that the ocean isn't leaving, it is gathering momentum. The horizon darkens. A roar, like that of a freight train or a jet plane, begins to fill the air. And then it hits. It is not a perfect surfing wave. It is a 30-meter-high wall of black water, debris, and fury. It strikes the coast of Sumatra at 800 kilometers per hour. There is no time to run. The water pulverizes concrete buildings as if they were made of paper. It rushes kilometers inland, dragging cars, houses, and trees, turning entire cities into a giant washing machine of deadly debris. The scale of the disaster is unprecedented. The 2004 tsunami did not stop in Indonesia. It crossed the entire Indian Ocean. It struck Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, and even reached the coast of Somalia in Africa with lethal force, 5,000 kilometers from the epicenter. In total, 14 countries were devastated simultaneously. 230,000 lives were extinguished in a single morning. It was the first global catastrophe televised almost in real time by tourists' cameras, showing the world the fragility of our existence in the face of sheer hydrodynamics. When the water finally returned to its course, the landscape had changed forever. Where there were cities, now there was only mud and silence. The 2004 tsunami taught us that the sea, the source of all life, can become our greatest predator without warning. The history of the Earth is a history of violence, and we humans are simply the lucky ones who managed to dodge the blows, for now.
Number 6. The Great Reset. We travel back 66 million years. The location is the Yucatan Peninsula in modern-day Mexico. The world is lush, humid, and teeming with life. Massive reptiles, the masters of this planet for 160 million years, roam the jungles. The ecosystem is in perfect balance. It is a Tuesday or a Friday. It doesn't matter. It is simply the last day of the Mesozoic era. High above, in the vacuum of space, a rock the size of Mount Everest is silently approaching at 70,000 kilometers per hour. It has no hate, no agenda. It is just physics. When the asteroid hits the atmosphere, the sky tears apart. It is so bright that it blinds any creature looking at it instantly. It compresses the air beneath it, creating a shockwave hot enough to melt stone before the rock even touches the ground. It crosses the atmosphere in less than 2 seconds. To the dinosaurs on the ground, there is no sound yet. Light travels faster than sound. There is only a blinding flash, and then the end of the world. The impact releases the energy of 100 million megatons of TNT. That is billions of times stronger than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The asteroid vaporizes instantly, punching a hole in the Earth's crust 30 kilometers deep. Earth, rock, and water are liquefied and thrown into space. A mega tsunami, hundreds of meters high, radiates outward in all directions. In a radius of 1,000 kilometers, everything is incinerated instantly. The shockwave travels around the globe, triggering earthquakes in every continent simultaneously. But the impact wasn't what killed most of the life. It was the rain. The debris thrown into space cooled down and fell back to Earth as millions of burning meteors. The entire atmosphere turned into a broiler oven. For hours, the surface temperature of the planet soared to hundreds of degrees. Forests ignited globally. 75% of all species on Earth were wiped out. The dinosaurs, the rulers of the planet, were extinguished. Darkness followed for years, choking the plants and starving the survivors. Silence fell over the Earth. But in the darkness, deep in the burrows, something stirred. Small, furry, insignificant creatures, our ancestors. They survived the heat, the cold, and the hunger. Because the monsters were gone, these small mammals could finally leave their holes and conquer the world. This is the paradox of catastrophe. Every end is a beginning. Tambora gave us modern art. The plague gave us the Renaissance. The asteroid gave us us. We are the children of disaster. And as we look up at the stars tonight, we must remember, we are not the masters of this planet. We are just its current survivors.